earlier this week, I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone very late at night, which I often do, though I know the experts agree it is a suboptimal way to prepare your mind for rest, or at this point to lead any kind of hopeful existence. But that's what I was doing when I came across an advertisement for a movie sequel that I have been eagerly anticipating for many years, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, if you must know. And I just saw the top of the banner ad, and I got so excited. And then I scrolled a little bit more to reveal the date of your release. Now, everybody get out your calendars. It's May 5th. And then I saw some text right below that, which just stopped me in my tracks. It says, in theaters. And I thought, what? We still have movie theaters? Now, I know we do, but for some reason it was a shock to me that anybody would release a movie in the theaters. And it made me realize it had been many years since I've actually even been to a movie in the theater. Do you remember when we used to do that? Go to the movies? Like a regular thing? Now, I know some of you are better at catching things on the big screen than I am, and I know my own drop-off in attendance was pandemic-related, of course, but also related to my concurrent season of parenting young children, when all of a sudden going out to the movies cost $236. And along with those two things came the rise of streaming, so I can just watch all this stuff in my living room, right? It was like a triple threat to my movie-going. But even thinking about that whole ritual got me happily remembering my movie-going days. And I was thinking specifically about how sometimes, back in the time when we went to the movies, tell me if you remember this, you would watch a movie, and then at the end, the credits would start, right? And the lights would come up, and people kind of started shuffling around. But sometimes you had reason to believe that there might be something more after the credits. Do you remember that? Like some deleted scenes or additional material, whatever, and you would think this because it was like a director or a producer who often did things like that, put more content in the end, or because a friend who had already seen it in the theater maybe had told you, don't leave right away. Does that ring a bell? Now, apparently the industry term for this is a post-credits scene, and in case you're like headed from church to some kind of trivia Easter brunch, I'm going to tell you right here, right now, the first movie ever to feature a post-credits scene was The Silencers in 1966, followed by none other than The Muppet Movie in 1979. Always try to give you something you can use out in the world. And after that, a lot of movies feature these things, either as a sidebar to the credits or at the very end. And most recently, almost all Pixar, right, animated movies include this. So when we went to the movies and you do this, you'd kind of wait and the credits would roll on and on and on, and they'd be talking about the third grip and the fourth grip and the score. And during that time, you remember, a lot of people would get up and leave. And it would make you a little bit nervous when everybody got up and left, like maybe you got it wrong, right? And there was, in fact, nothing worth waiting for, and you were just wasting your time. But maybe there was a couple other people in the theater who looked like they were waiting too, and you kind of like have your eye on them a little bit, right? Like, is there? Or isn't there? Or are they right? Or am I right? Or all these people leave, right? And if there was something, and if you waited it out and saw it, you felt this kind of certain rush of pride, right, of satisfaction, because your hope had been made good. Which is what Easter is all about. Firstly, because that's exactly what happened to Mary in this story that we just heard about the resurrection, right? I really do love this version. There's all 4 versions, but I love this for multiple reasons. My favorite resurrection story is the Gospel of Mark, just so abrupt. Everybody sees there's the tomb's empty and they just run away. The end. They don't tell anybody, they just do anything, they just leave. That's the end of the story. But I also love John's, it's a very meta kind of approach to the resurrection. It's filled with metaphor and connection and meaning, very on brand for John. So we have here Mary, you heard that right, Magdalene, that is, important fact, and she comes to the tomb on the first day of the week on her own, which I might note makes me love her even more, she who has no fear and is perfectly content to go alone to the tomb of a murdered dissident during a religious festival riffing on liberation while living in an occupied territory. All right, that's neither here or here. Hashtag the future is female. But she arrives at the tomb And she finds that it's empty. And so what does she do? She goes to get the other disciples, and they run over there and they check it out. And they go in and they see that Jesus is not there. And John tells us they see and believe, though they had yet to understand. Whatever that means. They saw and they believed, but they had yet to understand. And then they just leave Mary there by herself. Right? And she sits there for a little bit. This is so interesting. She sits there. What's she waiting for? I don't know. But she hangs out and she cries. And then after a few minutes, she takes another look. Did you catch that? And whoa, there's 2 angels in there now. And they say, why are you crying? Which seems like a strange thing to ask somebody in the middle of a cemetery. But they say, why are you crying? And she turns around. And there's Jesus, the risen Christ. But she's so distraught, she doesn't recognize him. She says, tell me where they have put my Lord. And then he says her name, Mary. And in that moment, she knows. She knows that what she's hoped for and that what she's wondered about and that what she has off and on dared to believe, she knows that it's true, that he was the one. And she goes from there and she tells everyone, right? Beautiful story. And I particularly love 2 things about this story. One is that she just sits down next to the tomb to cry. Did you hear that? That is just like about the most true thing I have ever heard in Scripture. Because think about it. How much more can somebody take? Your leader's been killed. This movement that you hope would change the world appears to be over. Your friends are in danger. And now someone's stolen your friend's body. And sometimes you need a good cry. Did you know that? That is true. Sometimes you just need a good cry. Mary does that, and I really love her for it. I love that she brings all of her worries and her sadness and her grief and loss right up to the tomb. And I love that that's where Jesus meets her. Not along the road or not back at the ranch, right? But where she has brought it all the burdens she's got, right up to the place where hope might still be alive. That's where the miracle happens for her. Which I think is often true, right? That God greets us in our hour of trial. That God comes to us in the midst of our pain or right at the moment of our anguish. And that we find that God is not out there, orchestrator of our distress, but right here, our companion in it. I think that's what Mary's story tells, and what can also be true for us who follow in the way of Jesus. So I love that. But I also love that Mary gets to see Jesus because she sticks around, right? Everybody else leaves. They've gotten the main point. He's gone, and that seems to be enough for them, but she is still there. Why is that? John doesn't tell us. But she stays long enough to take another look. And when I think about that, when I sit with that, and when I imagine that, and I might ask for the Spirit to talk to me about that, I wonder if she isn't doing something like sitting through the movie credits. I wonder if somehow, deep inside, deep down beneath the sadness and the uncertainty and the fog of grief and the lack of recognition, she knows that the story isn't over yet. She knows that there is more. She trusts her friend who told her that this wasn't going to be the end. She has faith, and so she stays, and she finds out she's right. Which I think is kind of where we are at this stage of Christendom, right? Don't you think this is cool? This is working on multiple levels. Like, we're here, it's 2,000 years later, and we know the basic plot. If you've ever sat here before on an Easter Sunday, you know Jesus was dead, and now he isn't. He is risen indeed. We've heard that maybe all of our lives, maybe since childhood, and maybe that simple teaching has been enough for us, and we can pack up and go home and feel satisfied. Maybe eat a couple Peeps, but you know what I'm getting at. But maybe for some of us, it's a little bit harder. Maybe we find ourselves disquieted by the state of things these days, either in our own lives or in the life of the world. Maybe we look around and we see too much war and not enough compassion. Maybe we've grown weary of violence Or maybe we've grown tired of carrying oppression's heavy load. Maybe we're worried that those we love or we ourselves won't make it alive to see the curtain fall on the life we had planned together. Maybe we worry for our kids or our wallets or our democracy or our businesses or our planet or our transgender friends or our church. I think what we hear in the story is that all of those thoughts and feelings and conclusions are reasonable. And they're welcome in our relationship with God and in this community of faith. I think what we hear is that sometimes it is an act of faith to sit down on the bench outside the tomb and cry for those things. But here's the other thing. Here's the good news today. Here's why we need to dig into Mary's story and her testimony. That is not the end. It's not. It's not the end. Wherever you are, whatever you're looking at, there's more. This story is an assurance of that. It's God whispering in our ear, there's more to come. Draw close. This isn't the end of the story. It's not the end of your story, and it's not the end of our story. And my invitation to you this morning is just to try to hold on tight to that, like Mary tried to hold on tight to Jesus, the idea that this isn't the end, even when it seems like it is. You know, the resurrection promises that even our physical death isn't the end of our story. This witness that we've built this whole tradition around is telling us that there is more, that there is more justice, that there is more mercy, that there is more peace, more grace, more love. And so if we're smart enough, we're going to stick around and keep weeping and keep laughing and keep fighting and keep watching out for signs of new life and keep hoping and keep singing together. And I know that faith sometimes is easier to speak than it is to live. And I know that a lot of folks right now who are around us are opting out of hope. I know that they're getting up and putting on their coats and they're leaving faith behind, turning to the more alluring promises of cynicism and radicalization and fear. And some of those are our siblings in our own tradition. And I know that can make us nervous. Like, did we get it wrong being here? Maybe there isn't much to hope for, and I can see that. But when I read this story and when I think about our sister Mary, it fills me with resolve. And I realize that I would much rather stick with her, holding both my heartache and my hope together and trusting that this isn't it. I would rather speak with thousands of years of my spiritual forebears the truth that have kept a light on in the dark for them and which keeps it on now for us. Death does not have the last word. Love will conquer all. He is alive, and so shall we be. I will live to see God make good on my hope. And so I say to you with as much meaning as I can, happy Easter, friends, for he is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Amen. Friends, we've been in the habit during our Lenten journey of trying to say out loud